Hey guys, it's Istebrak. So today I wanted to talk about sculpting. So I started the year off with sculpting. I'm going to end the year off with sculpting. And I feel like compared to where I was when I first started ZBrush last year in December, I've improved a lot. I feel more comfortable sculpting now compared to when I first started it. When I first started it, I was like a slave to whatever was happening at the moment. So if I had an idea to start sculpting with, I had a face that I was seeing in my head, it would never be the face that I ended up with. And that's like the beginner blues for anything. That's the beginner blues for drawing, beginner blues for, working with makeup and having a specific image. And the better you get, the closer you get to what you originally envisioned. So the way I found out whether or not I drew was after a year of just studying faces 2D, I moved into sort of better understanding of how I imagine a portrait and how I organize a portrait in my mind. So what word I would use to call the nose, or very geometric or soft or upturned or elf-like, and what word I would use to describe the chin. And so that became very vivid in my memory, and I feel like I have way more control over my visual library. So it doesn't kind of hijack my project, but I end up, in control, and the final image looks like what I wanted. So that's definitely something that I started noticing as I started sculpting again this month. And I originally had the idea for a very sculpted male face, sort of looking like a death mask. I'm not sure if you've seen Napoleon's death mask, but just Google it, Napoleon's death mask. It just looks so handsome and so beautiful, and it's the contours and the light is really what inspired me. So I wanted to go for that closed eye, sunken in eye sockets, partial smile, that smile of death, really gruesome, but it's really what I wanted to go for. It was really inspiring me, all those gentle contours in the face. And so I went for that. And as you can see in the early stages, I really was just blocking in. I was not worried about it looking like what I had in my mind. That's another big thing is, again, so we start off with the more you draw, the more your project will look like you envision it. And when you block in, don't worry about it not looking like what you envisioned it as, because that's just the blocking in. Try to turn off your imagination for that 1 second. It's not about creativity when you're blocking in. It's about the skeleton. It's about the skull. It has everything to do with the sciences. It has nothing to do with your creative force and nothing to do with your vision momentarily. So just give it some time and it'll start to look like a normal head shape. What I started doing is I started making myself pre-made, pre-blocked faces. So it's no longer me having to go through the blocking stage and be at risk of a hijacked visual library, but kind of prepare the block for me as if the way you can buy prepped clay for yourself, or have the clay prepped for you, or just working on a template. So it's not a template for the face itself specifically and the details you envision. It's just a pre-blocked face. So you go straight into creativity. So that's something I started doing to help me preserve what I'm imagining, what I'm envisioning, to stay as close as possible to what the result is. So draw more faces and block in. And if you're blocking in, if you have to block in, make sure you're turning off your creativity. It's all about sciences and not about creativity. And then try to pre-block paintings, sculpts for you. So pre-existing, ready to be detailed blocks. Just a simple block standing bust with a neck, and the head size is accurate to the kind of weight distribution per gender or character type. So his head is very masculine, low eyebrows, heavy. That's the stuff I initially blocked in. Strong cheekbones, wide jawline, large nose, and distance between the nose and the mouth. And I didn't want him to look so Herculean, because I started to notice he looked very Herculean, especially with the butt chin. So I eventually softened his chin just a little bit to make it continuously have that vision I had for a death mask, which was very soft-chinned, very sunken-in jawline. And at this point, after getting the eyes, the detail I wanted, I started to zoom out more. So I started zoomed out, zoomed in for details, just so I can get some kind of detail level to keep me going and see more of the character, and then I zoom back out. So it's the same as it is 2D. You zoom out, you sculpt the block, you zoom in, and you consider the detail. But for sculpting, what the problem is, You don't really get a character read right away if you're delaying the detail that long. A healthy delay of the detail for sculpting is a little bit different than 2D. 2D, eventually, get to the final brushstrokes, but with 3D, as soon as you rotate to a new scene or a new angle, it's like you have to start all over again. So what you do front view looks nothing like side view for the longest time, and that's another big thing that I found I improved on. The side view of my drawing, of my sculpt, looked very similar to the front view, as if it was the same person. So that has to do with detailing early. So that means I have to go in and make sure that the projection of the upper lip is a little bit higher from side view, and then go back and adjust how that affected it front view. It's a lot of stuff to manage, whereas in 2D you only have to manage one angle and work large to small on it. In this one, you have to work large to small per angle. Do you understand? So front view, large to small, rotate it into 3/4 view. Suddenly you have to start all over, large to small, and recorrect it. So it's not so much we're detailing early, it's that we have to go back into the blocking in the middle of the process just because we shifted the camera over into 3/4 view. But that doesn't mean delay your 3/4 view, shift into 3/4 view as soon as possible. I've noticed I stayed in one angle too long and I'm sculpting in that angle for way too long. And I started speeding myself up. I started saying, okay, shift now. It doesn't matter. You're comfortable now. It probably looks like crap when you rotate again. And of course, I rotate and it looks terrible. So I started getting in the habit of rotating as much as possible. And I think that's really what kind of led to this success. Staying zoomed out, blocking in early, turning off my creativity where I didn't need it, and focusing only on the sciences and the head size and the proportion. Turning on my creativity vividly as much as possible and making sure I'm recalling the kind of feature I want specifically, and making sure I have the image that I intended, and not letting the blocking stage hijack that process. And then finally I have rotating as much as possible. So rotating from front view into side view for the eyes, if I'm blocking the same size. So I don't have to keep shifting from large to small every time, and for the next rotation upcoming. That sounds really weird for those who don't sculpt, but for those who do sculpt know exactly what I'm talking about. And as for the ZBrush brushes that I use, the tools, the one that I use the most out of all of them is, of course, clay buildup. And in clay buildup, what you can do is change the alpha. So you can use a more of a blocky finish, which actually makes it feel a little bit more realistic. I hate overly soft alpha for the clay buildup. Another tool I used a lot of was the move tool, which is great. It's kind of like shifting a whole section. I'm not sure if there is an equivalent for that in real life. I always like to find the equivalent of that so I'm not too digitally dependent. But at the same time, Liquify is also a move tool, and it's just a luxury that comes with our digital medium. Another tool that I use is Damn Standard, which is wonderful. Like, it pinches in the root of the brush, and it either pinches in or out. And I use that a lot around the eyes for the eyelids, creating that squared thickness of the eyelid on the eyeball, and that half partially opened eye, the upturned eyeball. You can see the pupil of the eyeball sticking out, the iris and the pupil. So that was definitely something I used to create that indentation. I used it around the nose and the nose tip and the geometric little touches on the tip of the nose. The thickness of the wing of the nostril, I used Damn Standard for that. What other tools did I use? I think those were my main tools. Of course, there's the Soften tool, which is just pressing Shift, I believe, and that's always set up for you with any tool that you have. You get the shortcut for Soften. So it does tend to look a bit gritty the first couple times you lay down some clay, but you end up needing some of that grit left behind, but at the same time you want to soften it up just a little bit, as if you got a wet sponge and you're just dabbing away at the clay to make it a little bit more like skin. And skin by texture is very soft and pliable and spongy. So I wanted some of that effect. As for the material I start with, I believe I use default Dynawax, the one that has a bit more subsurface scattering to it. So it's got like these reds on the edges, which I really, really like. It makes it feel a little bit more human. I don't really see any use in any of the materials that you can use on ZBrush. They're really overly textured, overly dark. I feel like they're there just to populate the content. Default Dynawax, the one that I use for this, is just the best one. For painting portraits. If you're like doing something like you're sculpting a gun or you're sculpting an object, So sorry, I'm losing my voice. I've had a lot of classes today. Then I guess you can use the other textures. But the default Dino Wax I think is the best for portraits. You can change the skin color. Just there on the bottom left, that little gradient, the color picker right there, you can change it. But I really feel like this is perfect for what I was going for. It wasn't any specific race, it wasn't any specific color, and I could just enjoy the sculpting process without the material getting in my way, because I feel like the material can really be a very big distraction, and it gets in the way of the process. And I found that this is the one that I just was naturally drawn to, something really akin to the grayscale that we use with our studies. And it was just nice and out of the way. Some of the things that challenged me the most was the distance between the nose and the mouth. Not the distance, but the space. The space that filled that distance. It was always as if the top teeth were missing. So I kept having to push it out. The more I detailed the Cupid's bow, the more I pulled out the upper lip. So the upper lip protrusion, I could say, as started by the end of the septum on the nose. That was really, really annoying for me. As for the nose, I really didn't like the nose until I hollowed out the nostrils. So if you're sculpting, go ahead and hollow out the nostrils. Don't just leave them filled in. You're really going to miss a lot about the character of the nose. The character of the nose is really defined by the way the nostrils look. When they are just, actual nostrils, when they're cavities. So the size of the nostril, the wing of the nostril, the thickness of it, the type of hole, is the septum lower than the nostrils, and the way that the skin of the upper lip slides into the nose, that was all really adding a lot of character. This brush that I'm using right now was like a detailing skin brush, and you just have to follow that with a quick soften every time you use it, or else it leaves these funny little pixels everywhere, or polys. I didn't like this effect, but I just wanted to test it out. I feel like it's great for giving that skin texture to any face you're drawing. It's a wonderful texturing brush. I forget what it's called, but it's just that picture over there. You see it on the right, on the left, that menu, under the dots, under the speckles, or it is the speckles actually. I'm really not sure, but it's all of them. It's the first brush and the second last and the second one and the third one for the alpha, or whatever qualities it needs. I think the switching back and forth, that's my soften. So after every brush stroke, I use the soften to correct it a little bit. Here I am just messing around with some other texture brushes to see how they work. I am not a professional at ZBrush at all. I'm a portrait artist. I'm a 2D portrait artist, which is why I have a face that reads, but I'm still lacking a lot of kind of the understanding of, I feel like if I understood ZBrush more, I would be able to draw a paint sculpt better with it. But again, my skill is determined by what my medium is allowing to get through. Skill is not really capped by medium, but skill can be hindered by medium. So make sure that you know the basic rules. Follow some tutorials. There are wonderful tutorials on YouTube, and they might really just get you started into sculpting. I have always recommended sculpting as a way to diagnose and correct your rotation problems 100% of the time. If you watch the previous sculpting the portraits that I've sculpted for Patreon videos, you can see that I've always said that sculpting is the best way. It's the thing that I tell students to do when they have rotation problems. Just get some Sculpey and sculpt the faces, and they get a whole new understanding of what happens with the temple and how the temple looks away from the camera, what happens with the ears and how they're tucked to the side, the size of the head, the presence of the jawline. All of that is what you benefit. Just knowing how to do all of that and transfer it into 2D, that's what you improve on, and that's what comes back, just the head structure. And again, it always leads back to being able to block and how blocking is not the time to be creative. It is not a creative outlet. It's the sciences, and always make sure that you rush those first before you rush the creativity. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you guys in the new year. Hopefully for those who are just watching these from my channel, because I do release these at the end of every year, thank you everyone for watching these videos. I think you guys are going to watch this one first and then the other ones. I'm not sure how I'm going to set it up in my playlist, but thank you to all my patrons this year. You guys are wonderful. Thank you for keeping the community running. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Bye.